today is the usual suspects from the Melanated Mental Health Awareness Podcast. But I have two very special guests also, Miss Rashonda and another guest that you all familiar with, Brother Lars Johnson. And tonight, like I said, we're going to talk about not just the presidency, but just our leaders in general and the stresses and things they deal with and how it affects their decision making. So without further ado, we'll get into this conversation. So what I'm gonna do now is let my special guests introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves and their credentials, and then we'll get right into the talk. So I'm gonna start with you, Mr. Shonda. How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you all for having me. My name is Rashonda Beecham. I am the mayor of Pelahatchie, Mississippi. That's also located in Rankin County. I'm the first African-American mayor in Pelahatchie, and I'm the first African-American mayor in Rankin County. I have one daughter, and I'm married to Roderick Beecham. I'm a graduate from Jackson State University, majoring in accounting.
I didn't know I had a history maker with me tonight. The Black girl magic, Black excellence, all in one spot. I'm here for this. Go ahead, Lars.
Well, Rashawn, I just want to say that that's awesome. I didn't know that's awesome. I've been to Palahatchie, so that's awesome. So big up to you. My name is Lars Johnson. So I've been here before and just happy to be back and be part of the Black No Chaser family. I'm a professor at Wayne State University. I have a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology, as well as degrees in school administration, education. And I primarily study leadership, stress or strain relationships.
I didn't know I had a history maker.
And then I'm also a research fellow for a subunit of the Department of Defense. And I do some applied work in the area of leadership and stressors, strain in the workplace. And yeah, that's it.
Appreciate that, Brother Lars. We'll go to Miss Deshara. Come on with it.
Well, good evening, everybody. Deshara Dobb from Louisville, Kentucky. So continue to keep us lifted up in your thoughts at this time. Mental health practitioner and the founder and CEO of Vision of Promise, LLC.
And Miss Adrian.
Good evening, everyone. I am Adrian Marshall. I am currently practicing a licensed marriage and family therapist associate in the hot state of Georgia right now with what's happening with this election. So currently working in the areas of mental health nonprofit as well as private practice. And so good evening to everybody.
Good evening.
All right. So, when I scheduled this talk, Adrian and Deshara, we talked about this, it was kind of expected that we would have a winner right now. I didn't think it would drag out like this. And I know, with COVID and everything, it kind of slows everything down. But, if my memory serves me correctly, when Obama won, like I was in the bed by 10 because it was over with. But this is a little different. And with the participants of this election, man, we've seen a lot with both of them that, having to talk about mental health in our leadership is very necessary. Matter of fact, Trump is live now, melting down like he normally does. And it's very telling with him that he's not all that. And it's not just tonight, it's everything that he's done. But we'll get to that in a minute. What I wanted to kind of start with here, I wanted to start with you, Rashonda, being that you are one of our country's leaders. And, Lars mentioned, Pelahatchie, and I'm pretty sure it's some things you really deal with that you shouldn't have to. But like, how is it that you handle the day-to-day stresses of, running a city?
Well, as far as myself, yes, it's very difficult considering me being the first Black mayor and the first Black woman mayor to govern this town. I've been faced with a lot of adversities and having to deal with it daily. I've been in office for about 3.5 years now. My term is 4 years, and every single day I've had to deal with something. It has come natural to me now. I just wake up expecting something to happen because this is our life now. However, having to deal with it, it takes a lot of prayer and support from family, encouragement, words of wisdom from mayors that may have been in office a little bit longer than I. But what I've experienced a little bit while I've been in this term is that some of the mayors that's older than myself and been in office longer than myself, they haven't still experienced what I've experienced because my town is 60% Caucasian and 40% African American.
Oh, that's amazing. To be honest, I never would have expected that, honestly. And when Adrian told me, that you were Mayor Pelahatchie, normally I look, stuff up to be ready for this. But I never would have imagined that the percent would be that wide of a difference that, they still elected you. So that's pretty dope. So like, I know you like deal with adversities and things of that nature. Like how has some of the things that you dealt with affected the moves that you've made? Because I know that the things that you do, has Pelahatchie in your best interest. But like, how has the things that you've had to face affected the moves that you've made?
Well, I'll give an example. Prior to being elected, I had several businesses and they were established. And now I don't have them. So, and I say that because once I got elected, you have the people that didn't want it to happen and you have the people that wanted change. And so the ones that wasn't happy about it, of course, they've done everything in their power to either get me to quit or to cut me financially. That was one of the things. Let's cut her financially. Let's call some friends and shut down her businesses. Let's find out if all her taxes are paid, everything. And you would be surprised because it's a small town and or a mayor's position, but it's still considered Rankin County. And if you know anything about Mississippi, then you would know about Rankin County. And but everything that happens on a national level to a politician, it has happened to me on a local level.
Oh, I would think smaller towns would be worse because everybody knows everybody's business.
Everybody.
Yeah,
yep, everybody knows everybody.
So getting to like what we're seeing here, and I want to kind of go to you, Lars, because you studied this, you've written about this, you've dived deep into the whole leadership aspect. Like, what are some of the things that you're seeing, whether it's Biden, Trump, McConnell, somebody like Daniel Cameron in Kentucky, who I can't stand. Like, what are some of the things that you're seeing, with these leaders, that's concerning as far as like their thought processes, that the mental state, honestly, because I think some of the things they're doing is just crazy. So what are some of the things that you are noticing?
I think what I would say is that largely the veil has been removed. And so we're seeing behaviors that people were suspicious of. And if you talk to the right folks that are involved in politics at high levels, they'll tell you that a lot of these things always went on. But for some reason, there's this sense of security now in engaging in these behaviors in the public view. And so in the past, the things that, and I think a lot of that has to do with Donald Trump and what he brings to the table, not just for the GOP, but for politicians in general. You know, he lacks the demeanor of your typical politician. He doesn't come with the training, and honestly, he largely doesn't care about the usual decorum that comes with that. And we're seeing a lot of that veil being removed by others, and they're just pushing it back and saying that if the person in the highest office can govern this way and behave this way, well, so can I. And so, you know, with Daniel Cameron in Kentucky, I mean, it was clear that something was suspicious about the whole Breonna Taylor case. And for him to get up in a press conference and equate himself to men like Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, who was there, and say, you know, I have these experiences too. It's like, no, you don't. And for you to assume that just because you're Black, that you're in the same position, knowing the circle that you keep now, I'm like, that's disrespectful to the Black community. With Mitch McConnell, I mean, we've known this for years, but I think what we've seen over time is that there's a certain freedom in I mean, honestly, just the sense of superiority and this high level of just social dominance that we're getting from Mitch McConnell, that we're getting from Donald Trump. And you know, it comes down to, for a lot of Black folks, a lot of very, very oppressive behaviors. And that's how we perceive these things. But what's really happening for them is that there's a freedom in this. And so when we start talking about mental health, I feel like some of these folks have actually stepped into who they really are. And they're doing it on a front stage. And so when you think about something in my field that we call trait activation, that's really being your true self and allowing your true personality, your true behaviors to manifest. And people tend to select into opportunities that allow for that. And what we're seeing of Donald Trump is nothing new. This is how he's always been. And so we're going to question Donald Trump's mental health today. The real question is, well, why weren't we questioning it 30 years ago? I mean, this is how this man has always been. But we have seen changes in behavior in other folks like Mitch McConnell, because he used to work across the aisle, but now he's closed the door. And it started with Obama, you know, when he closed the door to working across the aisle, and it got even worse after Trump became president. And so I see this largely as people having the opportunity to be who they really are, feeling free in being who they really are. And there are more and more politicians doing this. And it's not just Republicans. I mean, there are Democrats as well. The only issue is that a lot of the things that the GOP is doing adversely impact the Black community, adversely impact LGBTQ communities. It doesn't speak to diversity and inclusion whatsoever. You know, they issued an executive order to push back on diversity, equity, and inclusion training because, and the central argument with that was because it makes you feel bad. So as white folks, we feel bad when people start talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because the perception is I'm under attack. And no one's actually pointing at you. And they issue this executive order without any evidence whatsoever. So, you know, from that standpoint, I look at that as there's a certain instrumental benefit in a lot of the oppressive behaviors that you've engaged in over the last 4 years and before. And the scariest thing to an oppressor is the inability to oppress. That's what scares them. And that's what I'm seeing with a lot of the things that are going on. We have seen an orchestrated attack on the Civil Rights Act. And that's what's been happening over time. And the harder we make it for them to attack, or the more we push back, the angrier they get, the more outbursts we see, you know, the more their narrative goes away, and the harder it is for them to shape the narrative, the more they lash out. So that's why our president right now is somewhere throwing a temper tantrum, because the numbers are dwindling and they're not in his favor.
Oh yeah. Speaking of which, it just came across my phone that the state of Georgia, Biden is 4,000 votes away from taking the lead. So I know Trump is losing it right now. So you know, we brought up Daniel Cameron, brought up Breonna Taylor. I want to go to you, Deshara, since you've been boots on the ground there for so long. What are some of the things that you're seeing being done or not being done by the leadership that was such a high profile case where like the world is watching? Because they lack it right now, been lacking. It had seemed like it hadn't changed.
That's a really difficult question, because I almost feel like that because this is such a national story. I think that a lot of leaders that have been unable to know how to manage things kind of on the basic level is now feeling the pressure of how do you handle it within the scope of the entire world watching you. Anywhere from our city county council members to our mayor to our governor. I definitely feel like that they are not doing what they're supposed to do for the case, for sure. But I think that because it's a lot of politics involved when you're dealing with someone's life, you're dealing with an injustice that occurred. Um, it's challenging, and especially for somebody that lives here, someone that went to school here, went to school with a lot of the parties that are publicly acknowledged now and are being criticized, and I feel like as they should. I really think that mentorship is not happening. I think that those conversations behind closed doors of really holding people accountable hasn't really occurred. I think a lot of people are calling people to the carpet publicly, but again, you're trying to keep the facade. You're trying to keep the brave face instead of really saying, okay, this is my first time in the case of like Daniel Cameron. This is a first major case. Maybe there were some errors. Let me consult, whatever the case is. I think that now a lot of people are feeling a whole lot of pressure, but at the same time, I'm thinking that people are really just not being honest in the capacity that they have within their role and the preparation that they had within their role when it came to being able to handle such an issue such as this. So it's been a lot going on. They're still demonstrating. So I'm very happy about that. I'm happy that they know that no one is going to stop until justice is served. But at the same time, we have such a long way to go, and I definitely think that the national politics is definitely playing a role in what's happening locally here.
Yeah, it's pretty much like that everywhere. Like Laws is saying, people are showing who they are, and like people talk about like trickle down economics and things like that. I think the same it goes for like how people are acting and reacting. It's trickling down from leadership. Like for instance, Trump has stoked fears and hatred and all type of crazy rhetoric. People who said if he doesn't win, there's going to be a civil war. Things of that nature. Like you didn't hear a single person say this shit when Hillary lost, or you know, you didn't hear this when Al Gore lost. Like they could have burned Florida down for the shit they've done years, but you never saw that happening. And like right now, because he's so brazen, he's so reckless, people are following suit. Um, I'm gonna go over to you, Adrian. We was talking about Georgia and the move that they're making. Like y'all had a very high profile case as well with Ahmaud Arbery, and we saw with the leadership in that area a bunch of bullshit. Like they were on their third prosecutor, I believe. Um, what what are some of the things that you have seen? Not just with that case, but like a lot of cases that happened. You had, with Mayor Keisha Bottoms in Atlanta, some of the stuff she's facing. Like, what are some of the things that you're seeing happening with that area's leadership?
What I've been seeing here so far, definitely with Mayor Bottoms, is just her tendency to just really be firm in her leadership. The case with Ahmaud Arbery, that happened a few hours away. So that's a little bit closer to like the coastal area of Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. And I think they just voted to oust that DA who, was working with that case. So even when what we were seeing, not just with those high profile cases, but even with what was happening with the pandemic, you had a lot of mayors in local jurisdictions that would sort of go against, what Kemp was trying to even do with some different things. But I can appreciate Mayor Bottoms for standing firm, for being unapologetic to how she wants to run the city of Atlanta. I think everyone, for the most part, I mean, you have some people, who, have some complaints. But for the most part, everybody has kind of gotten behind her. We can see not just Fulton County, which is the county seat of the city of Atlanta, but you have Cobb County, you have Gwinnett County, you have DeKalb County, Clayton County, who are, those are all outliers right outside of Fulton, who are showing up as blue as well. They're voting for their best interest, even though we do have some things happening in the rural areas. But one thing I wanted to really bring up is that we've been kind of throwing this term around of temper tantrum, with Trump kind of having these temper tantrums and things like that. And it really boils down to just basic emotional management skills that we even teach our children. Right. So I guess I'm just wondering, for people who are in high leadership positions, it's great to have your external, supports, your family, your friends, and people like that, people maybe in your religious centers that you can count on. But this question is a little bit too for Mayor Beecham. What are some things internally that you can sort of call on to cope? Because there are going to be times, even in jobs, regular jobs, but definitely in leadership positions where you're going to have, some extremely stressful days. People are they're going to make you angry. They're going to annoy you, to a higher level. And I guess I'm just curious about, how do you deal with that internally? Like, what are your coping skills that you use as a leader, as a mayor, when you're working so hard to try to bring people together? You're muted.
Thank you for reminding me. That's interesting that you asked that question, because I'm having to use my coping skills on a regular basis here. So, but many times what I do is I may call my pastor and he may like send me a verse and say, hey, read this, or I may come talk to my husband and kind of strategize mentally on, what's going on. I have had so many situations and events that have taken place. Again, so I'm used to it now. And for instance, I know, Adrian, you may have witnessed a board meeting or one or two. They're just now beginning to settle down. And one of my board meetings, like my aldermen would literally yell at the mayor out the blue if it's something that I may disagree with. Now, I'm not in position to make any as far as decisions or even cast a vote, but I do run the meeting. My board even tried to have an attorney to file something to be over me, and I'm elected. So he ended up resigning. The recent attorney just resigned to keep them from firing him, because one of the aldermen were mad about him actually telling us the law. And he didn't want that. He wanted him to not tell me the law, even though I already knew it, but he didn't want it. He didn't want him to tell it. So they try to find things to trip me up on a daily basis. And I guess the way that I handle it again is with my friends and family and my husband. And when I go to work, I'm emotional detached. I don't take my emotions into my office with me, because I have to handle business at that point. So I cannot be emotionally tied to my job. But when I come home in a secure place, then I release my emotions with my husband.
Right.
And go ahead, Adrian.
I was going to say, right. But like I said, that speaks to, like I said, again, those emotional management skills, not being emotionally reactive. And what we're seeing in a lot of our nation's leaders, we are seeing a lot of emotional reactivity. And I think that leads to a lot of mistrust amongst people, probably not as much mistrust as it should, lead to, especially with what we're seeing with the voting with Trump. But it leads to enough mistrust that, we're kind of like, well, whoa, wait a minute, what did we do? What did we elect? And so it's funny to me that, so many of our people, brothers and sisters in the military, they have to go through all of these testings and things like that. But it's a little bit concerning when there's a possibility that maybe our leaders that we elect don't necessarily have to adhere to some of those same standards, right? Because it's important.
It's very important. It does matter. I think in some instances, of other government leaders, they may not have it as hard as some, but for the ones that do, I really think that each government leader should have a counseling session, because some things could get, extreme. And I've had that to happen. I've had one of the employees basically said, I haven't hit her yet. I filed charges and the charges went away. It's just like, oh, we're not going to do anything about it. I've had an alderman throw paper at me at a board meeting, and and it's live. I've had an alderman that gets up screaming because I'm filming the board meeting that's public, because the people in town they were basically denied access to their public rights in town. And when I became the mayor, I basically said, hey, listen, this is your town. You are welcome to anything here because it's public. So come to the meeting. If you can't come, log on. You can, hear what's going on. And I was basically crucified for that. Still, in some instances, I'm going to court next week in reference to all of these things. My pay was cut. That's tied to emotional distress. The previous mayors were making $1,000 a month, which was not much at all to run a town. And they cut my pay to $250. They would argue that they cut their pay too, but they only attend a meeting once a month, unless a special session is called. However, I attend to the town and operate the town. I'm superintending the town every single day. And my check is literally $121 a month. I think the past couple of months, I had 3 checks that I didn't even cash because, I just had them sitting in my dashboard, but I literally bring home $121 a month. To me, it's modern day slavery. I've never seen nor witnessed anything like this in my life before. And the only reason why that is not only taxes come out, but I'm having to pay my own vision and dental insurance. So I don't have any health insurance. I drive my own vehicle for whatever the town offers, and I'm not compensated or reimbursed for gas. So mental health plays a major issue here.
After hearing all of that, honestly, why? What drives you to continue to, put yourself through this? When it's, and I know that people don't get into this type of thing for, the financial rewards, but goddamn, you cutting me down financially and emotionally every day. And,
every day.
Why do you pull yourself out of bed each day and deal with this?
To
what
be
drives
honest,
you to keep doing it?
I was voted in by the people here. And the very people that I was voted in by, they had no clue what was going on until I became the mayor. And initially, it was something that was brought to me by God. I didn't want to run, but I kind of challenged him a little bit, by saying, hey, listen, if my mom says no when I tell her about it, and I felt like she was going to say no because my mom worked for the town for 17 years, then I'm not running. And I just knew she was going to say no. However, when the time came, she said, well, if God says go, you got to go. And I'm like, what? Seriously? So with that being said, after being elected and actually winning, I felt like I had an obligation to the people that did vote for me, that trusted me to run the town. And I've never been a quitter, no matter what it was in life. And I've always been a leader. I was a student body president, captain of cheerleading, captain of basketball. So I've always led. And my family and I, we believed in, if you get in something, you don't like it, at least finish it out. And then you don't have to, compete again, or you can if you want to. But these people trusted me they elected me and they trusted me. So I don't want to give up on them. And I definitely don't want to give up on the calling from God. So that's why I get up and go. And I haven't missed a meal. I have a roof over my head. I have a car. God has still blessed me no matter what. So no matter what man has done, God has made sure that he's delivered what I needed to continue.
I mean, they say no weapon formed shall prosper. These white folks, they building a lot of weapons, boy. I swear to God. That's actually really, really dope. And that goes back to the strength of the Black woman, because whether people like it or not, like Black women has been the backbone of this society, this entire country since basically its inception. So shout out to you for dealing with all that shit, because man, I'd have been walked out.
Thank you.
That's just me. I have a temper, so I'm like, what, y'all can have it. But that's just like with the election going on now. Like it has been said since before it started that the only way out of this administration is with Black women, and we've seen the power of it. I'm gonna go to you, Lars. I hadn't heard from you in a second. And by the way, this man is probably one of the smartest people I've ever talked to in my life. He barbecued a little bit. He ain't on my level, but other than that, he's probably one of the smartest dudes I know. So like Lars, like hearing some of the stuff that Rashonda had said, like what are some of the things that you come across, that kind of touch on the things that she's went through, and like how like how is there any safeguards in place, for somebody like herself to fight this type of stuff off?
Well, I mean, one thing that I want to note, and I'm not going to speak for Rashonda, but my guess is that she'll agree, given what she said, is that she went into the job knowing that there was a lack of resources and knowing that there would be opposition. And given her resume and all the things that she shared in terms of leadership history, you don't become mayor of a small town in Mississippi expecting everything to go well. And that is part of the job, even though it's not written in the job description. And there's a lot of jobs like that, but there's some unique jobs. I mean, I'm from a small city in Mississippi, and so there's some unique jobs out there. But resources and having access to resources, that's extremely important. And resources can take on a lot of different forms. One of the resources that she spoke of first was her marriage, and that's the resource that we call a condition. But there are also other resources like money, which we would look at as more of an energy type of resource, because you get a return on its use. And so the fact that they're cutting away from her resources, but she has other resources that she has access to, that's important. And then there's also the motivational piece in this. And all I heard was that she has a very strongly focused normative commitment, meaning that there's this normative draw in terms of leadership, meaning that, there's something inside of her that speaks to her in terms of being a leader. And this is something that I should do. But also there's an affective component that she spoke to when she talked about the people, and that obligation to the people and actually caring about the people. And I think that those pieces are extremely important. And I'm talking about this whole motivational lead idea that we have in my field. And there's another piece of it called non-calculative that looks at more of the parts that are going to benefit me. And I didn't hear anything about that from you, Rashawn. And that's a good piece, because she went into the job knowing that all of this is intrinsic, that there is no carrot in terms of money or some big house, some backroom deal. That's just not what you get in Pelahatchie. That's just not what you're going to get in a small town in Mississippi. And so, this isn't something that is uncommon in leadership roles, especially in organizations that have really finite resources. And leaders aren't alienated from stress, nor are they alienated from strain. And when I say stress, I'm really talking about stressors, and those are the things that draw from our pool of resources. because we all have a finite set of resources. We only have so much energy. There's only so much time in the day. We only have so much money, and so there's all these things that can draw from us in the workplace or even outside of the workplace. And whether or not we have the resources that we need to deal with these things is largely determinative of whether or not strain ensues. And do we actually have to deal with some of the more deleterious effects of those workplace demands? Are we going to sacrifice our well-being to accomplish at work? And there's always a give and a take. And I was very happy to hear that, she goes home and she talks to her husband, and that they're doing fine, and they're finding ways to make it, because that's just not the case for a lot of leaders, and leaders do burn out. I mean, burnout amongst leaders is a real thing. And when I say burnout, I'm not talking about just this emotional depletion piece. That's the center of burnout, where we talk about being emotionally exhausted and I don't have anything else to give. But there's also this diminished sense of efficacy, where I don't think that I'm as good as I was anymore. That's an important aspect of burnout. And then there's cynicism. This place is just crappy. It's terrible. My outlook has changed now because of these circumstances. And so as they draw more and more from you, and as they pull away from that resource reservoir that you have, and you begin to run dry, people spill over into this burnout, and they can carry that over into their homes. They can carry it into their family lives. So, work to family conflict is a real thing, just like family to work conflict is. And then, these COVID times, it's even more concerning, because now you have to expend even more resources just to deal with this other thing that the whole world is dealing with. And the other things that you were dealing with before, especially for leaders, they haven't stopped. Like, they didn't go away, And so if I ask you, Rashonda, about, your work a year ago versus your work now, my guess is that you would say it's harder, because now
Absolutely.
you got so yeah. So I mean, what she said, I was like, well, man, I wish it wasn't the case, but I'm not surprised by it, because these are conversations that I have with leaders, and these are a lot of things that they share, that they turn to their personal resources quite often, especially when they're working. And I would call it, Rashonda, it sounds like a toxic work environment to me. That's exactly what it sounds like. It sounds like a text of a toxic work environment. And there's a lot of people that go to court over the conditions that you're talking about, that actually file, lawsuits through the EEOC because of the conditions in which they work. And these conditions aren't germane to the work itself. These are people that are creating these conditions. That's why we call it an environment. It's not a component of the work. This is something that people are creating around you, and it's not necessary, right? It's not anything that's just part of the work you're doing.
I'm gonna speak on something when you said about filing an EEOC complaint. In a normal situation or a normal case or a normal employee, that will be the route that they take. Well, considering that I'm an elected official, of course, I've been told that even if you file EEOC a complaint, you're technically elected and not an employee. But the lawsuit is in place, because I do believe that I don't care who you are, what origin you're from, everybody should be treated equally. And I'm not getting that equal treatment here. Now, they've made some changes. The board, our setup here in Peleachi is different. We have 5 board members, 1 alderman at large and a mayor. However, the board hires and fires in my case, in my situation. So I can't hire, I can't fire. I can suspend only with pay. The board has to suspend without pay. So a recent incident where I have suspended one of the employees due to insubordination, and the board brings the person back. And this person I had to have escorted out of the building, entered back in the building after being escorted out, and they brought this person back. So I have no power to do what needs to be done for the town to govern it properly. Because if a person, and what has happened in my case is, the employees in their mind says, the board doesn't like her. They're going to continue to go against her. So we're going to make sure we're working for who?
The board.
The board. Absolutely. And we could disrespect her because all they're going to do is bring us back because we're doing what they want us to do. So yes, this situation is very toxic. However, having to manage through it, I'm dealing with it. And again, I mentioned my husband a lot because he has been a strong factor in this situation. There are times when he knows what I like to do. He knows what I like to eat. So when he knows that something has happened, he takes me completely away so that I could regroup. I regroup and I come back stronger than I was when I left. And sometimes it takes 2 days for me to regroup and come back and say, okay, at the end of the day, I'm still the mayor of this town and I know my rights and we're going to go this way. So if I have to suspend you 20 times, then that's what I'll do until you understand that you're not going to disrespect me.
I think
Yeah,
that's
I'd have been quick.
I think that's a really good segue into just kind of talking too about that extra added element of having your life, you know, in front of the TV screens and nationally, you know, with our national leaders, right? Because, you know, Mayor Beecham, I'm thinking about if you're having to deal with this on a local level, I think about recently, you know, like Obama and the mental strain that both he and his wife had to endure, you know, to be able to lead the country, him being the first Black president of the United States, and what that really took, right, to be able to constantly have to perform. Because usually when I'm in session with clients, you know, I try to teach that it's okay not to have to perform all the time. It's okay not to be okay sometimes, right? But on a more national level, it's like, you know, I often wonder how leaders are able to kind of smooth things out and do that self-care and do what they need to do in order to continue to lead so that their cups don't become empty, right? In terms of being able to continue, like I said, to lead appropriately in the way that they need to without just constantly being worn down mentally from the cameras in their faces, you know, the intrusions into their lives, you know, their marriages, their children's lives. That's not even added to, you know, in addition to how you're leading and the criticisms and all of those different things. So I think Michelle Obama, especially as a wife, you know, she had to had the patience of Job to be able to kind of deal with some of those things, both, you know, she and Obama.
So before we, really hop onto that, I know Deshara had something that she wanted to ask Rashonda about. So before it slips my mind again, and I'm gonna kick it over to you, Deshara. Let you do what you got to do.
Listen, we have powerhouses on here, so I'll just keep myself muted until it is time to talk. But I wanted to take a pause, Mayor Beecher, because we're going to put some respect on your name this evening on this platform. Because one of the podcasts, like one of our very first podcasts, we talked about microaggressions in the workplace. And it's interesting because when we were talking about that in that space, we always talk about it in the sense of being like employee or working under organization, company, etc. But it's so I'm really appreciative of even hearing your insight, because I think there's this assumption when you have power and privilege, when you're in these types of roles, people think like, yeah, there might be, some dissonance. There might even be microaggressions, but you have the upper hand. There's always this assumption when you're John Q. Public and you don't really have a concept of what it's like to be in upper management or be in government like yourself. And I'm sitting here wondering, and I think it was really good that you mentioned about like what is your self-care. But at the same time, I'm also wondering, like, how do you manage putting on the mask? Because at the same time, kind of what Adrian was alluding to, when you are a public figure, there is a lot of pressure, whether it's something as small as you making sure your hair and your face is beat and, you're together for the camera, but it also has the more extreme, where in the case of you getting paper thrown at you in a public meeting when the cameras are on, and how you manage that kind of I'll even say abuse, right? I'm just wondering, like, how do you manage the mask? Because although you have, it seems, really good coping skills and really good supports in place, it's like you still have to go to a job where there is a lot of situations that are outside of your control. And sometimes I think for anybody, especially for Black women, we are the most disrespected, we're the most unheard. And so I'm just wondering, in your position, like, how do you manage that, knowing that you are an elected official? I don't know, like, what your you know, your hopes are in terms of your career moving forward, but just how do you manage that? And what can you say to your sisters out here and to other Black leaders and how they can manage that as well?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. I have to keep in mind every single board meeting that we have, every special session that we have, I always keep in mind that there's somebody watching me. And I have to be mindful how I respond. Even though there's paper thrown at me, you know, considering the situation that I'm in, there's paper thrown at me. The average person would have, you know, jumped up and said, you know, ready to fight. But we're already looked at as angry Black women before we even open our mouths. So before I even react, I'm already judged. So I just decide not to react. I may laugh because I think it's, you know, if you're 40 or 50 years old or 60 and 70, you're throwing paper. I mean, that means I'm not the one with the problem. You are. So you may need to go get checked out, you know, because if you can't handle a business question, then this may not be the seat for you, or this may not be the platform for you. And I've always had a business mind. So my thought process is to come in to handle business. We're servants, but we still have to run the town and we still have to handle business. And we can always agree to disagree without being mad. I mean, to me, it's simple for me, but other people cannot, you know, can't handle that. So what I do is I focus again, I emotionally detach myself. As long as you don't put your hand on me, we're good. You know, but in defense, if you put your hand on me, then I have to defend myself, you know, because you did that. But if arguing, yelling, you can do it all day long. It won't touch my spirit because we need to handle business. And most of the time in my board meetings, I'm moving on from that. If you want to argue or talk about that, you can do that later. Let's discuss, are we passing a motion or not? Are we going to do this or not? You know, and I may state my case as to why we should do it because we're here for the people. And I may remind you that these people voted for you for them, not for your own personal agenda. What I've learned in being in this seat is that a lot of political people, they have personal agendas, even though they're elected by the people are forgotten. And I'm here to remind the people that, hey, listen, I'm here fighting for you with no money. I'm here fighting for you with my family because I need you to understand that you matter. And because you elected me, I'm gonna stay here so that you understand that you matter. And we're not leaving and we're not running anymore. We're gonna stand and we're gonna keep pushing and pressing until everybody understands that we should be treated equally. So I am gonna go to court and we are gonna fight because no woman should be paid $121, even if you're first Black woman, no, and that goes in office and work 24/7. No woman should be working as the clerk, the mayor. After you understand that the mayor doesn't hire or fire, you present people to hire for the clerk, but you deny them and you say, oh, that's your job. Well, pay me. So, you know, we're not back in 1950s. I wasn't born then. You know, I don't know anything about slavery, but I do know about going to college, graduating from high school, having high honor roll, going to college and pursuing accounting, graduating, having the hours to sit for the CPA. I know about all of that, but I don't know about the mistreatment or the prejudice or not being paid. I don't know anything about that. So I have to fight for the rights of not only myself, but our children. I don't want my daughter to grow up and experience anything that I've experienced during this tenure as mayor here in Pelahatchie. And this is my home, by the way. So some of the things that I've experienced and went through, I definitely didn't see it coming because I didn't know the elder generation on that level or capacity. But I still put my makeup on. I still dress up. I still smile. I still wave. I'm still happy because you're not going to take my joy from me no matter what, because I always detach myself emotionally because I'm not going to let you touch my spirit in that way. So I hope that answered your question.
A whole word that we all needed to hear. Thank you.
Try Jesus. Please don't try me because I fight. Oh, let me ask you this. I'm not gonna ask you. I'll ask you offline. But so I just got another notification. it's less than 4,000, about 3,500 in Georgia with like 18,000 left. And so it's looking like, Georgia is coming through. So I want to kind of switch over before we get out of here to Trump and Biden. And I want each one of you to give me your take on depending on, no matter who wins, whether it's Trump or Biden, like what's your take on their mental ability to perform the job at the level that we, the American people, need? I mean, we've seen what Trump has done, and we know he's a head case, a narcissistic baby man. But if he wins, hope not, and Biden wins, like, what do you guys think as far as how they'll lead this country out of the muck that we're in? I'll start with I'm gonna start with you, Adrian, and see what you think.
Well, we definitely can in no way, shape or form diagnose anything or hint towards that. I think for the most part, what can be said is that there are definitely some questionable behaviors on the part of our current leader. There's been a lot of back and forth, with saying one thing and then coming back and doing another. There's been, I guess, to put it nicely, a lack of decorum, which is totally inappropriate for the office that he holds, our current leader. And there have been some speculations about what he could possibly be dealing with mentally, right? Or even some things that he could be dealing with due to, aging. With our current candidate, with Biden, that kind of remains to be seen a little bit. Unfortunately, with him as vice president, we don't get to see a whole lot as we do with the president himself. So it's kind of like, we'll get a chance to see some things, if he's elected. I know that there have been questions about whether or not he suffers from any sort of dementia and things like that. That word has been thrown around. I think it's been determined that, of course, he's been a stutterer for most of his life. And so that has a lot to do with how he formulates his sentences and communicates his thoughts when he's in front of the camera. So I think that kind of remains to be seen. But I think, like I said, definitely with our current leadership, we can say with confidence that there have been some questionable, like I said, behaviors. And hopefully moving forward, that no matter what leader gets into office after this week, my hope is that they just have a really great team, behind them to help counsel them, that they can consult with, that will help them make better decisions, certainly, than what we've had these past 4 years.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. You spoke of people talking about Biden possibly having dementia and whatnot. That has been the conspiracy theory that I've been hearing from a lot of Republicans that I, been around, that this is all a plot to get Kamala in. As soon as he wins, then they're gonna label him as having dementia and unfit for office to get her in there. I'm gonna go to you, Deshara, and get your take on the same question.
I will definitely echo what Adrian said, but I also will expand that and say that accountability is very important. So one, even when you're dealing with clients, unless you are willing to make a change, no change is ever going to come. So even if they do have, a support team behind them that can include some type of mental health services, some type of mentorship, coaching, etc., if you are in the position where you feel like that there is no room for growth, and there's no room for improvement, or that you don't even find fault in what you're doing, I think that that is already automatically letting you know that there is going to be kind of what the mayor mentioned, your own personal agenda that you're bringing to the table. I would definitely recommend for the people that are around whoever comes into this role, to definitely continue to hold them accountable. Because I think one of the things when it comes to this office, you can assume that most people are aging, or they're at the place that they're almost geriatric, or kind of in the scope of pre getting there. And so there's always going to be some type of health component, some type of mental component that's going to come. And so I think that when you're talking about mental health, it's also a physical health aspect that has to come into play as well. But also, again, the accountability. You're always going to have to remain sharp, but at the same time, I don't want anybody to make an excuse because they're assuming or perceiving that this person has some type of condition, that's going to, allow them to have to take a step back, or you're not going to have the same expectations of them coming up front. So that's what I would say. I think definitely this role needs mental health services. I think all the time, even outside of our current leader. But I also think that accountability is important too. So everything that that person said they're going to do, and the accountability that they have to communities, they have to keep that up as well, because that's a part of keeping your brain strong as well, always having to stay on your toes. So that's what I would say.
Indeed, accountability. That's a word that the current administration knows nothing about, because he be lying. I'm gonna kick it over to you, Mayor Beecher, and get your response to the question.
I personally think that regardless of who becomes our president, that it's time for our nation to heal. We have been through a lot these past 4 years, and we need to have we need to witness professionalism at the White House. We need to witness again. I'll echo also accountability. We need to witness hope and security, because right now I think a lot of the people are feeling insecure and not safe. We don't feel safe anymore because of what we've experienced in the past years. And right now we don't know who will be our president, but again, at the end of the day, whoever that person is, we still have to live, right? So I would pray and hope, my prayer and hope would be the people that are surrounded around them will emphasize how important it is to remain positive and moving the United States forward instead of backwards. And I think that with that being said, that mental health, it plays a major part in that. And yeah, I think I would have to end that right there, because I can't go too far in detail about it, but I just would hope that, each one of the parties consider, again, just being professional across the board. And I think I've seen a few tweets, but I stopped watching after a little bit, but some of the things were to me a little bit unethical. So I would, hopefully my wish is that whoever the president is would listen to their counsel and try to, do what's best for the people. And again, not personal agendas. So that's all I have on that.
Right. I'm hoping whatever they do is for all people, not just a certain sect or subsect or just for them. We're gonna finish it off with Dr. Lars, my boy, one of the smartest people I know. I know you got a good hot take for us to close this thing on down.
Well, I would rather be the best barbecue grill master that you know.
That's me.
Yeah. All right. We'll see one day. Post COVID is on. And I'm sorry, folks. I had to lean back. My back was killing me. I bought this chair and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So yeah, COVID times, right? You buy a new chair and it's like, man, this thing's terrible. All right. So I got a lot to say, but I'm not going to say all of it because I don't want to hold us. But you know, I've watched this and I've become more vocal, especially in these last 6 months. And I appreciate Adrian for mentioning the Goldwater rule. And we're not going to, you know, diagnose anyone outside. And I'm not a clinician, so I'm sure for sure not going to diagnose anybody. I leave that to my more clinical, my clinical friends and colleagues. But there is a discernible pattern of behavior that we're seeing from both candidates, but we've seen more from the president. And I think that his, I tweeted earlier about his peculiar relationship with numbers. And I think that if you really think about, you know, the nature of his presidency, and, you know, things before he was president, he's always been obsessed with numbers. And the numbers tend to be trivial. They don't mean anything. They're trifling. And so they hold some personal meaning, but they don't mean anything to the rest of us.
Yeah, he's trifling.
Yeah. I mean,
But go ahead.
He has this obsession with those numbers, like inauguration attendance. That does absolutely nothing for the American people, right? And we've seen that over and over again. Recently, he attacked LeBron James over ratings for the NBA basketball championship, and of course, the ratings were down. You know, it was just a whole different feel for the game, and it was played at a different time. You know, and so there's this lack of acknowledgement of context, and then this unhealthy focus on numbers that do absolutely nothing for the job, but he touts these numbers as if they're meaningful in the broader context of the United States. I think it's a misalignment of what he's supposed to be doing and what he values. And I think that a lot of Donald Trump's issue is a value-based issue. And some of the values that he holds near and dear that are more problematic, like this obsession with numbers and not the right numbers, because let's make it clear, what's happened with unemployment was at a trajectory that was established during the Obama era. What's happened with the economy was a trajectory that was established during the Obama era. And so if you're going to come with me to me with data and start screaming, oh, I've done this for Black people, well, then you need to show me a point of inflection where that slope begins to change. Because if I see that it's going the same way, and it was going that way when Obama was in office, all you've done is maintain that curve. And I want to know how you actually did that. Because you haven't done anything that impressed me. You just kept it going. And that's great in and of itself. But what you're valuing in terms of your leadership is not necessarily something that's valuable to the country. And to take on the highest role in the world and to not shift your values or align your values with what the country needs, I think that's really, really problematic for a leader. And I think that's the source of a lot of his stress, because that's where he gets a lot of pushback. Because people are constantly saying to him, why are you talking about these things that don't matter? You know, you're not talking about things of substance. You're focused on numbers for attendance and rallies and, you know, the celebrities that are endorsing you. But you're not really paying attention to what happened with Black businesses during COVID. Almost 50% of Black businesses closed their doors, likely permanently, within 3 months of COVID. Why aren't you paying attention to that piece? Why haven't you talked about that statistic? You know, why aren't you bringing that piece up? You know, you're screaming about the crime bill, but you haven't talked about how incarceration started to go down well before your office, and you're not contributing anything there. You're just pointing to an issue that's an over 20-year-old, almost a 30-year-old issue, but the numbers associated with that issue aren't trending in the direction that you're suggesting that they are. You keep pointing to values and numbers and having this peculiar relationship with things that really don't matter substantively to the American people. And I think that when we push back on that, that's when he gets upset. That's when he has a problem. I don't necessarily think that he lacks the mental health to run the country. I think that mental health wise, I think he's in a place where he can run this country. I just think he lacks the ability. And that's a completely different thing. I think he is 100% out of his league. That is largely the problem. And that's why he's so focused on things that don't matter to the American people. When it comes to Joe Biden, I think he has a lot of learning to do. And I think that's true of any president. I think that when Barack Obama took office, when Bill Clinton took office, they had a lot of learning to do. Joe Biden has made mistakes. He said things that he shouldn't have said. He cracked that joke with Charlemagne, you know, and he's, you know, and I told folks, I'm like, look, first off, if that surprised you, then you haven't paid attention to Joe Biden over the years. That's Joe Biden. You know, if you put Joe Biden in the black barbershop, Joe Biden is going to talk noise with the best of them. Anybody that's close, and I know people that are close to Joe Biden, anybody that's close to Joe Biden or has actually listened to his videos over the years knows it about Joe Biden. That sometimes he gets excited and he says things that aren't the most appropriate thing to say. But the capacity to come back and say, you know, I was wrong, I shouldn't have said that, I think that's really important for a leader. And he's been able to do that so far. And I think he's done a lot more listening, especially over the last year, than he'd done in the past. And that's something that we're lacking in current leadership. Someone that has the capacity to listen. This whole idea of this conspiracy behind putting Kamala, I'm sorry, not Kamala, I'm sorry, I apologize, Kamala in place. I've been hearing people say Kamala, now I'm saying it. Kamala, Senator Harris in place in terms of VP and selecting her. This whole idea that, you know, she's his replacement. First off, let's not detract from her agency as a African American Black woman and an Indian woman and being the first in her role. Let's not pull away from her agency, because let's be clear, these are elected roles. She 100% has the ability to be president and run this country, right? She didn't need Joe Biden in the sense of ability, but I largely think that Joe Biden could benefit from someone like her. And I think that's why he selected her. I think he recognizes her strengths. I think he recognizes she has a closer ear to the community than he does, that she is not without issue. She does have some flaws. She does have some issues in her record. There are things that people are going to, and I'm a big, you know, Kamala Harris fan. I'm be real with you. That was my pick. You know, that's who I wanted to win, you know? And so, but I do recognize that there's no perfect candidate, that there are things that she needs to talk about. There are things that she needs to discuss and be real with the American people about. But we're dealing with folks that are willing to have these conversations with the American people and be substantively transparent with the American people and admit when they make mistakes. And I think those are all hallmarks of good leadership. And then I think that a lot of what we've seen of Joe Biden, a lot of the gaffes, the man has been on the campaign trail for almost a year now. He's tired. You know, I think we forget, you know, and I mean, nothing against, you know, the elderly population or older people, whatever you want to call them. They tend to be really great employees, you know, pushing back on the stereotype that older folks are not. They tend to be really, really great employees. You know, I mean, there's a lot of stereotypes that are negative, but the truth is they tend to be stable. They tend to be great employees, and they learn and they listen. And I think that Joe Biden brings a lot to the table, but we have to be real. He's in his late 70s, you know, and this campaign trail is a lot. He is not, you know, how old was Barack Obama? Like late 40s when he became president, you know, when he was on the trail. I mean, it's a very different, if we're making those types of comparisons, we're not being fair here, you know? And so I think, and Donald Trump hasn't been 100% throughout his campaign. And so we've been so selective in how we look at these presidents and look at the candidates. I think we need to be realistic about, you know, how we have these conversations about these folks, that the campaign trail is hard, that no one is going to be on their A game at all time. They're going to make mistakes and they're going to have gaffes, but coming back and sitting down and saying that, hey, I was wrong, I misspoke, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to learn. That's the hallmark of good leadership. Aligning whatever your goals are with the goals that benefit the people. Just like the mayor said, that's what's important. When you come in with your own agenda and you're not willing to change trajectory, that's a problem. And I think that's what largely we've seen of Donald Trump. We don't know what his agenda is. We don't know what his plans are. And largely from a leadership perspective, he has been flying by the seat of his pants for the last 4 years. And that's a problem. We still don't know what his healthcare plan is. Biden laid out a healthcare plan and made it very clear what he plans to do. You know, I think that those things are important. We have to take those things in context. Like I said, I wouldn't say that mental health is what's keeping the president from governing this country the way that he should. I think it's just a fundamental lack of ability. And I think that there are deficits in terms of personality. I think behaviorally, he just does things. He's just a disagreeable person, and it just doesn't work well at the level of leadership that he holds. And you know, that's my quick and probably over my time assessment.
Yeah, it was definitely your time, but you know, I
got me started.
I know, man, but you know, I always enjoy talking to you, man, because I've never not learned anything by talking to you. So, you know, I always look forward to it, and when we get together, it's gonna be my turn to teach you when we bust out them grills.
Okay.
So, the only thing I want to say about all of this is, regardless of who wins, I think that, you know, we all as a community need to come together. All of this, you know, infighting, finger pointing, all of that needs to cease. and desist immediately. And we need to, work together, especially on the local level, and rally around mayors like Mayor Beecham and city council and all of that, because that's where the real change occurs, is at the local and state level. I think that's one of the most important thing about voting. And I also want to say, by seeing how tight these races are, your vote does matter, people. They do matter. They do count. And in 2 years, when we're doing the House and Senate, you need to show up then too, because that's where a lot of things take place that really affect us day to day. And that's pretty much all I have to say about any of that. Again, I want to thank each one of you for sitting down talking with us. My usual suspects, Deshara and Adrian, always riding shotgun with your boy. I appreciate you, Lars, for coming on. We have to talk more often. And I really appreciate, you, Mayor Beecham, for stopping by, taking time out of your busy schedule and all that you're doing for Pelahatchie. And anybody at Pelahatchie watching, y'all need to tighten. What she going through is some bullshit. And she ain't gonna say it, but I'm gonna say it. It is what it is. Y'all need to tighten up. But again, I thank each and every one of you for doing this. I thank each and every one of you who are at home watching this. Please share this. Hopefully somebody will learn something and come away with a feeling of it'll get better. If the people who's in charge do some of the things that have been said here tonight. Again, on behalf of Dr. Lars, on behalf of Deshara, on behalf of Adrian, on behalf of Mayor Beecham, Beecher, I keep saying Beecham. I was watching Oz earlier, sorry.
It's Beecham. It's Beecham.
Oh, okay. I'm sitting there right. Good, okay. On behalf of Black with No Chaser, and last but not least, on behalf of myself, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I appreciate the likes, shares, and follows that you're giving us and the support that you are giving Black with No Chaser. And we're gonna continue to keep doing things like this to better inform our community and our people. So again, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next go round.
Have a good night. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Care, y'all. Thank you.
All right. I
That was
appreciate
interesting.
you.